Okay, hey guys. So today we're going to be doing a video. It's just going to be some really good Rhino tips and tricks to help improve your workflow, some really useful commands, and then we're going to be doing a little Grasshopper data management tutorial. So let's start with the Rhino stuff first. So let's start with Boolean commands. So Boolean commands are basically commands that help you join or sort of manipulate two closed surfaces or poly surfaces. So you see here I have a box and a sphere. So if we get these two to intersect here, right, something like that, you can use Boolean commands. So you can do stuff like Boolean union, which is kind of self-explanatory. It just joins these two shapes together. Now it's one shape. You can do Boolean difference here, and you pick the shape to subtract from and a shape to subtract with, and all that does is it cuts away the shape that you're subtracting with. Sorry. Okay, and then the third one here is Boolean Boolean intersection. So you select the shape and you select another shape and you get the intersecting area, right? And the last one is Boolean split, which is just sort of like a halfway between Boolean intersection and Boolean it's Boolean difference, except you keep all the pieces. Sorry, I had a brain fart. So when you do Boolean split like that, you see that you keep both the splitting objects and you get the intersection, right? So it's kind of like Boolean intersection, but you keep all the objects. Okay, so let's move on to aliases. So in Rhino, if you type options, you're going to open the options dialog box over here, and there's this option called aliases. So what are aliases? Aliases are basically sort of nicknames that you can use for commands. So like here I have my own set of aliases, and you can import aliases from the internet or your friends, and you can export them to people as well. And here's how you make alias. You just press new, you get new alias. So let's see what some of the aliases that we have already. So we have here like A for line, right? And double A for polyline. So instead of, because in Rhino we use stuff like lines a lot, instead of typing line every time and taking both hands off taking your hand off the mouse to reach over to the keyboard to draw a line, and then you want to do a polyline, you have to type poly and then line, or at least close to the full word. With aliases, you can actually just type A, right? And you get a line. You get the line command. You get that double A, and you get the polyline command. And you can do this for like any command. And the best part is you can actually also put commands together to make macros. So I can show you another thing here. Keyboard. So aliases is like nicknames for your commands. There's a separate portion called keyboards, a separate option called keyboard. And keyboard is like special keys and key combinations. And you can use these to execute commands as well, right? Like you guys probably know some of these, like Control G for grouping or Control H for hiding objects. So some really useful hotkeys that you can set are ones like this: set display mode, space M, space wireframe. And this is a command macro. So this is like a set of commands that run in order. So you can get like really efficient workflow. So all that does is if I press 1, so if I press 1, it'll switch to wireframe mode, right? Sorry, F1, it'll switch to wireframe mode. Or if I press F2, it'll switch to shaded. F3, switch to rendered. F4, ghosted. And you can set these to anything you want. So we're just gonna review it over here. You can see that it's actually 3 commands, right? Set display mode, M, and then wireframe. And how that looks if you were to do it normally would be, it would go set, you have to type set display mode, you know, and then you have to choose the display mode. So over here, you type M, and then you choose a mode, right? And so maybe I want to go to render, I type R. Right. So instead of going through that whole lengthy process or whatever, you can just go F1, F2, F3, or F4, right? And that makes things really easy. And you can do this for like any type of commands too. So it's like super useful and speeds up like a lot of like the usual commands that you guys use together. So let's go over macros still a little bit. Just one more thing with macros. So when you write macros and you write aliases, the command, you'll see over here the command is, some commands are preceded by an exclamation mark and an underscore, and some are preceded by a apostrophe. So all this means is that the command sort of executes slightly differently, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's pick a command here with an exclamation mark. So like move, right? Exclamation mark move. This is tied to M. So let's say with the exclamation mark before the command, all it does is that it kills your previous command before executing the one that you're sending. So let's say if I'm drawing a line, right? I'm typing line, and I'm drawing a line, and I have to select the second point, the end of the line, right? But halfway through that, I'm like, oh, you know, I want to move something, so I type M, right? Which is my alias for move, and it kills my line command. So my line command is canceled, and now I pick something to move, right? And I can move it around there, but my line command doesn't come back, gets canceled. So another sort of variant of that is the apostrophe. So we're gonna find an apostrophe command like here, like zoom. So you see it like apostrophe zoom, right? And how that works is that it doesn't kill your previous command. In fact, it sort of puts it on hold or pauses it. So if I were to be, once again, drawing a line, you know, I click the start of my line, and now I have to choose the end. And if I type Z, which is the alias for zoom, the zoom command executes, right? Instead of the line command. And so I drag a window to zoom. And you see at the end of the zoom command, my line command comes back. So my line command was just put on hold for a little bit. And it comes back after you finish your zoom command or whatever command you had the apostrophe on, right? So that's just a small difference. And then there's underscore. So underscore is kind of a weird one. You can read about it more on the Rhino webpage. If you go to macro editor, there's this little help button here. If you click on this, this pretty much leads you to the webpage, and it explains underscore, apostrophe, and exclamation mark in more detail. But underscore basically means that the command will execute in the localized language. What this means is that maybe you're running a different language of Rhino on your computer. If you put underscore before it, it just makes sure that the command you're executing executes properly, so that Rhino understands what you're doing. Like, say if you're running, I don't know much other languages, but if you're trying to do just move, right? If you were to send underscore move, and you're running Rhino in, like, I don't know, another language like Spanish or something, then Rhino would understand that it's the move command, right? Whereas like if you just type move into like Spanish Rhino, it's not gonna get it. It's gonna be like, what is that? That's not the Spanish for move, which I don't know what is, but yeah, that's basically underscore. So gumball. So gumball is this thing over here. Gumball is this. These three arrows with the axes and the little rotation bars, curves. And you can turn it on over here if you just click on this gumball, right? And gumball basically allows you to easily manipulate objects. So like if you click on the arrow, you can drag it. If you click and hold, you can drag it, you know, whichever axis you want. You can scale it with this in one dimension. If you hold shift and you scale it in all dimensions evenly, and you can also use these to rotate it. Okay, it's kind of hard to see with that, but you can use this to rotate it, right? And there's also some pretty cool tricks you can do with gumball. Like if you click on the arrow, you can specify the distance you want the object moved. So you can type 50 and see it just moves the object 50, in this case, units to that direction. So if you hold Alt and you click on it and you specify the distance, it duplicates it, right? So if you hold Alt and execute like a command like scale, it duplicates the object. So you see we have the original object here underneath, right? So that's pretty much it for gumball. So direction locking, when you're modeling stuff, sometimes you want to line stuff up. So let's say I have this, right? I have a second, let's say I have like, let's imagine these are two buildings, right? And this building is like, I don't know, maybe you want to line these two buildings up to be sort of like parallel to each other. So direction locking is pretty useful. What you can do is basically type move, and when you're moving stuff, you specify the point to move from. And so direction locking, see here, it's already locked to ortho, right? So usually this is pretty easy. Like you can just like use smart track, but in some other cases where you have more complicated geometry, you want to use direction locking. So we're just going to do move again. And what direction locking is you specify the direction, or sort of like the line you want to move it on, and then you press tab, and it locks the object to this vector. So it will only move along this vector, and you can sort of specify like where you want to move it to. So I want to move it to be in line with this object and there. So direction locking is pretty easy. Allows you to move in both the X, Y axes. For the Z axes, you can do move and then select your object, and it'll ask you vertical, yes or no, right? So if you press V and you press space, it'll go to vertical yes. And with vertical yes, it will only move in the Z axis, pretty much. So now you can line it up with like other objects on the Z axis, right? So that's it for some movement commands. Let's go over zooming and hiding. Just sort of like controlling the viewport and being able to see what you want to see. So let's say we have something like kind of small. Let's say, or here, I'll use this example. Okay, so let's say we have this, right? And this is kind of a complicated geometry. So like, what if like there's something over there, like right in there that I want to see, like to try to, I'm just gonna ungroup this. Oh wait, no, oops, wait. Okay, yeah, okay. I'm just gonna ungroup this. Sorry. Yeah, ungroup. I'm just gonna ungroup this. And so what if I want to get in here and I want to take a look at this piece in particular, right? So usually you'd be like, oh my god, I'm zooming, but you zoom and then it's like kind of hard to move the camera now. Like the camera only moves so little because you're super zoomed in, right? So what you can do in this case, you can actually use the zoom command. You can just type Z and drag a window to be your new like camera space, basically your new viewport, and it'll move you to that location and you get zoomed in. Or you can do zoom selected, which is actually super useful, which is ZS. So you have to select the object first, oops, and you type ZS, and it just zooms you onto the selected objects and like it orients you around it. So this is really useful because it allows you to like try to fit something perfectly in the viewport. You know, you just do zoom select on this, boom, it pretty much perfectly fits in your viewport now. And sometimes, you know, you make an object or you have an object selected, but you have no clue where it is. Like if I'm like that, right, and I have an object selected and I'm like, okay, where is it? You know, I'm searching for it. Instead, you can just do zoom selected and it brings you right there. Oh, it's upside down. Okay, yeah. So that's some of the zoom commands. So now we can talk about isolate. So isolate is super useful. Like let's say you have something complicated like this, right? I'm just gonna zoom in there. And you want to sort of mess with just this piece, right? And everything else is just being in your way. You can do isolate. So it's just isolate, and it just isolates this one object. What happens to your other objects? Well, your other objects are basically just hidden. So let's go over the hide command here. I'm just gonna undo that. So they're basically hidden. If you haven't been using hide, it's basically the same as changing the layer visibility almost. It's just another way of showing and well, hiding objects. So what the hide command is basically, it hides the object from view, right? But to get it back, you can just do show, and it shows all your hidden objects. So like, let's say if I banish half of this and I do show, it shows it. But you can also choose to show only selected objects. So let's say if I banish half of this again to the shadow realm, you can do show selected, and this basically brings you to the dimension that these objects are hidden in, and here you can choose which ones that you want to bring back. So maybe I like these bunch, I'll bring these back, and the rest are still gone. Okay, so that's hiding and showing. You can also use, I'm just gonna do show all here, sorry, show, and you can also use showing by layer. So when you use showing by layer and hide in conjunction, you can really organize, like get organized with your files. So there's some really easy commands for hiding. Hiding by default is Control H, hides your selection, and Control Alternate H does show, Control Alt H, and Control, so I'm gonna hide it again, and Control Shift H does show selected, and then you choose a few, and it'll show just those. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about layer locking and object locking. So usually, so this is all on one layer, right? This is all on the default layer. And if I lock this, I can't select it anymore, right? So this is a good way to have the object be a reference in the background, but not actually interfere with it or manipulate it. But another way to do this is if you click on the objects and you do lock. And this does object locking, so it's grayed out and you can't select those anymore. So you see, like, those didn't get selected. It's just a different way of locking objects, and you can do unlock as well, just to get them back. And you can also do unlock selected. So if I were to lock like a bunch of these and do unlock selected, it's pretty much the same as hide, right? And just unlocks those. So it's just another way to organize your file. So if you use this in conjunction with actual layer locking, right, you can get pretty organized. And change to current layer. So sometimes, maybe you're doing something like you want to get all of these little hubs here onto a different layer. So we'll make a layer called hubs. And so to get these onto this layer, maybe you're selecting them, and then you have to right click the layer and choose change object layer, right? To change them to this layer. So now you see they're on the layer hubs. Another way to do that is to select them and send the command change to current layer. So this just change them. This does pretty much the same thing, just changes it to the layer that you're on. But what's really useful is you can map this command to an alias. So suddenly you get really fast with it. Suddenly you're just, you're selecting them and you're just doing like the alias for change to current layer that I have is ch. So you just do ch, boom, and now they're on that layer, right? So it makes it super easy to sort of like organize some objects. So now let's talk about named views. Okay, so named views are in this panel here, the named views panel. If you don't have this panel, you can go to panels up here, and you can go to named views, and this will enable or disable the named views panel. So let me just show all of the here. Okay, so named views, what they are, basically, it saves your current view, basically. So you can just set this named view. So you save the view, and so wherever you move your camera to afterwards, you know, you can always go back to this view, right? And this is really good for like if you want to do presentations or do drawings from a very specific angle, and you don't want to have to keep like trying to set up that angle, or like, you know, maybe you're doing like isometric drawings, set your view to isometric. You set like an isometric view, say maybe like this, and you don't want to have to keep like going here and doing this to get the same view back again. You can just do save view, right? ISO northeast. And so it's really easy. You just double click it and it brings you back to that view. And this is really useful for the next trick that we're going to use, which is related to make 2D. So usually when you do make 2D, let's say I'm going to make 2D this, right? I want to make a drawing of this. It's called a Hoberman sphere. Okay, just give it a second because there's like a lot of pieces. So we want to make a drawing of this object, and we're going to do make 2D here. And so here we have make 2D, right? But you can see that this object, maybe we want to do it, maybe we want to outline it, right? Which is quite a big part of like a lot of drawings, is that you want to outline just to make it pop off the page a little more, to highlight it and separate it from other elements. But this is really hard to outline. Like if I want to outline this manually, I would be over here, like I'll make a new layer, and maybe I'll do like a polyline or something, and I'll be over here like clicking like for the rest of my days, right? And that's gonna take like forever, basically. So a good way to get around this is, I'm just gonna delete this. So a good way to get around this is actually the command mesh outline. So mesh outline, you select your object to outline, sorry, not to mesh, to outline, and it gives you the outline of the object. Just give it a second. This is a bit of a complicated object. Right, so it gives you the outline of the object. So the one thing with mesh outline is that it gives you the outline of the object from whatever perspective you're seeing it from, right? So if you see, if I move it over here, the mesh outline is actually flat this way because my camera was here, right? So it's not flat to the ground plane, and then you have to line it up with the make 2D. So an easy way to do that is if you have named views, right? So we'll just go through this all together at once. So if you have named views in it, like if you have a view saved, you can just go back to this view, and you select your object, and you can do a make 2D, right? You can do a make 2D, and then that gives you the lines. And then you can do, oh, got one piece there. And then you can do mesh outline. It's gonna take another second. So, okay, there, and you get the mesh outline, and now you have the mesh outline selected right after the command executes. So immediately you can do make 2D again. And we'll just name this outline, right? And this make 2D's your mesh outline, which gives you immediately the entire outline of the object, right? So you see here, lines, so just shift this over, right? So you have now your lines, and you have your outline, right? Super useful, easy outlines. And you'll get the leftover mesh outline over here as well, which you can delete or whatever. We're just gonna get rid of that. Okay, so that's named views, and that's some easy outlines with mesh outline. So clipping planes. So sometimes you have like really solid objects, like maybe this has like a crazy like interior or something, right? We're just gonna just get rid of this for now. and you have some crazy interior in it. So we're just gonna make a box with kind of like an interior. Oh wait, just do it. Yeah, one second. I'm just gonna make a box with the interior here. And so get Boolean union these objects, and you're gonna subtract these objects away. So now you have a box. It has like some sort of like interior to it, and you're like, okay, how do I want to be able to see like what's going on inside it, right? But there's no like good camera angles, so you can do what's called a clipping plane, and it gives you this plane which you can rotate, and this plane basically it cuts whatever it's intersecting in real time, right? So now you can see the interior. It hides this whole portion of your building. It shows whatever is on the side of the line, and so this is really useful because then now you can see like, oh, like my interior is actually like that. You know, you can move throughout the building and sorry, and basically look at it. So sometimes people use clipping planes to draw sections. So let's say if I want to do a section, or like something like this, right? My clipping plane is here and my object is here, but you see that even though my clipping plane is here, it's not cutting my object anymore. It's not working. So what happens is your clipping plane is only enabled in the viewport that you made it in. So I made it here in this viewport. It's not going to work over here. To get it to work over here, you have to just send a simple command called enable clipping plane, right? You select your clipping plane and boom, now it works in this viewport, right? Easy. And so another way to do sections is with the command section. So you just select your object and you select the line to section it on, and this gives you actually the line, a line drawing of the section, right? That's right across there. And that's another way to make section drawings. So now we can do object selection. So I'm just gonna unhide this. And so object selection, let's say usually we select objects. This is kind of like second nature to us, probably. It's that you just drag your box and you select, oh, this is all grouped. Sorry, I'm just gonna group this. Okay, so you just select your box and you select your objects, right? You get your selection box, you select your objects. So another way to do this is by dragging from the other direction. And the main difference is, I'm just gonna show you with maybe some lines here. Or actually, we'll do points. So, and lines. So when you select it this way, everything that's touches the selection box gets selected. But when you go this way, you realize that only objects that are fully inside of the selection box get selected. So you see we didn't get this line and we didn't get this line. So you see again, we only get this line over here because it's fully inside the box. So that's a easy way to sort of like separate and easily select objects. You can also do a really good command. This is a really useful command actually. It's select last, and there's also select previous. So what these commands do is they select objects that you're working with before, but there's a key difference. So if I were to do select last, if I were to, let's say, have a couple of these objects, right? And I were to move them, and I were to cancel my selection, and I do select last, it gives me these objects because I previously modified these objects. Select last will give me the objects that you previously modified, whereas select previous works slightly differently. So just to show you an example, let's say I have these 3 and I scale them, right? And then I'm gonna click on this, and click on this. I'm gonna add these to my selection, and then I'm gonna cancel my selection. So you see, if I do select last, it gives me these objects, right? Which are the last modified objects. Whereas if I do select previous, oh wait, it's because I already selected this. But if I select these 3, and I do select previous, I get these 3, which was my previous selection. I select last was my previously modified objects, right? So these are really useful because let's say, you know, you're trying to select a bunch of objects and you're just like, maybe I want to get all the hubs in this entire sphere, right? And that's gonna take a long time. And you know, halfway through, maybe I make a oopsie, I click somewhere else, and my selection is canceled. So how do I get that back? I'll just do select previous, and it gives me my previous selection back. So instead of going and selecting everything again, I can just select previous. Let's see. Okay, so another way to easily work is down here you have your object snaps. So let's say if I want to get only a certain type of object snap, right? But it's giving me all sorts of stuff. It's giving me middle, it's giving me center, you know, it's giving me all sorts of rubbish, and I just want, maybe I just want like end, you know? So to sort of like skip over all this stuff and just select end, you can actually go down here, but usually you would just start left clicking everything, right? Which kind of takes a while. So instead of doing that, you can just right click on the one that you want. So in this case, I want end. Just gonna right click end, and it cancels all the rest. It unchecks the rest of the boxes. So now I can just do endpoint to endpoint, right? And instead of checking them all again, you can right click on end again, and it gives you your previous selections back. So now you get all your previous OSNAP options back. Okay, so here's sort of a good way to work with groups. Let me just pull up another window. One second. Okay, yeah, wait. Okay, sorry. So for group work, some easy way to do group work is, let's say you want to communicate some sort of form to your professor, or you want to communicate to your coworker or to your friends or whatever, you know, you want to show your mom, right? Fine, cool. You want to do like rendered view, because rendered view is like nice. You get the shadows, you get the shading, but sometimes render view, like, it's hard to differentiate exactly where some things are and where some things are not. So let me try to find an angle that shows you what I mean. Okay, maybe I'm gonna do this with box, right? So the box, you see that sometimes things like this happen, where the color of your rendered object sort of matches the background, and you can't see where your rendered object is anymore. So suddenly it's kind of unclear, you know. And to counter that, you can actually just turn on this. It's in the display panel. So if you go to panels, you go to display, you can do check surface edges, and that just gives you the edge lines. So now it's like suddenly it's a very clear form, and you can start showing this to whoever you want. So how do you export something like this as like a image file? So there's two ways. If you're on Windows, I don't know if there's an equivalent. There should be like an equivalent Mac command or something. If you hold Windows key, Shift, and S, it brings up the snipping tool, and you can just select whatever you want to show them, and saves it to the clipboard. And you can click on this, and you can be like, oh, like, hey, this part is wrong, or maybe this part is wrong, and this part is wrong, and you can actually just, you know, clip that, copy that to your clipboard, and then you can go and Control V, paste it and into whatever messenger or however you want to send it to your friend. What you can also do is you can do view capture to clipboard, and view capture to clipboard saves your current viewport to the clipboard, and you can set the resolution of it, and you can set the scale. So scale here just means the number of pixels, right? So if we do scale 2, it just gives you twice the number of pixels. So this basically gives you better resolution. And then if you press OK, that saves it to clipboard. You can also do view capture to file, and view capture to file here. We'll just save this to, you know, some file that you want. You can just name it and save it on the desktop, and then you can link it to your friends. You can send it to your friends. Yeah, so that's about it for the Rhino tutorial. And now let's do the Grasshopper one.